Hi, Claire. Welcome on the Looped In podcast, the podcast where leaders talk about retail re-engagement and how can we, in this challenging macro environment, re-engage our customers with the best tactics. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it and looking forward to our discussion.
Obviously, you and I know each other from Farfetch, but could you share a little bit about your background, some of the brands that you've worked with? Obviously, not a CV review, but I'm really interested in like the common threads in your career and what
Yeah.
has kept you nurtured.
I've spent 25 years in luxury retail. I think the great thing about my overall experience is it's a real 360 degree of a retail team. So I started very much in department store. I went to Selfridges to sort out my fashion career. And 5 years later, I was still there. I became a team leader within 6 months and have been a retail manager in some way, shape or form or in leadership ever since. And then I carried on my passion for department store and multi-brand, and I went to Harrods for 8 years, and I think that's really where I learnt my craft. It's really where I learned customer centricity. I still to this day think Harrods is one of the best places to learn about the client and use data insights, but also just have the same standard approach of luxury service to any client, whether you're popping into Harrods for a pint of milk or you're popping in to make a high level purchase. Everybody gets treated the same, which I think is amazing, especially in today's landscape. And then after my department store era, should we say, I then went to try mono-brand. So I moved over to the Caring Group and became the head of retail for EMEA at Alexander McQueen. And I was the first retail lead they had. So really did a wide expansion store plan, opening various stores across EMEA, as well as connecting all the dots through the head office teams. Opened the flagship store in Paris and Rue Saint-Honoré, opened stores in Monaco and Vienna. It was really interesting looking at the clients and trying to learn about the clients and understand the client before you even expand into that region. So you understand, from a team point of view, who you need in your team, but also from a product perspective as well. So then I moved over within the Caring Group to Bottega Veneta. That's still to this day is one of my favorite brands. I think it's kind of one of the timeless classics of luxury, and they do it so well. I just think it's a beautiful product. I was the GM of the UK, so really ran 360 degree, so ran the head office functions as well as the store teams there, and really continued to build the brand. I was there during the time of the creative director takeover to Daniel Lee. So it was a really exciting time, but challenging at times as well, because there was so much change going on in the company. And then I took the move over to Farfetch, which is how we know each other. And I was the global sales director of private clients. So it was a huge global team of stylists we had in every Farfetch office. And I was really responsible for the sales strategy of that team and the leadership teams within each of the private client teams globally. So I spent 4 years in Farfetch, which really added to my department store mono brand. And from a customer aspect, it was, we sold as much offline as we did online sometimes. And I think it was really interesting because from a customer point of view, and I think that's the thread through my whole career, is the different kind of touch points from the customer experience and the customer journey. But we really showed the power of selling online, selling over the phone, and WhatsApp being our number one sales tool, I think, So that was an incredible experience where you have to leave a lot of what you've learned in luxury at the front door in tech and move on to that kind of a different mindset. And it certainly runs at an incredible fast pace. And then after an interim role as Chief Sales Officer of Jessica McCormack, I then started my own consultancy. So that's Atelier Consultancy. And we very much consult on everything I've just talked about. So it's about helping brands be commercially strategic, but also how they strategize their customer strategies and make sure they are communicating and making sure each customer has got an incredible experience as well.
Well, I think what's so fascinating is, as you said, like you really have that 360 of having worked in all the different types
Yeah,
of companies engaging with customers, but always with that direct line to the customer, which a lot of
exactly.
people don't have this
Yeah,
experience. And for me, I think it's one of the most valuable thing, because then it enables internal strategies to be powered by that true knowledge
yeah.
of the customer and that true customer centricity. So that's so exciting. And I don't think there's a lot of people who have done like the tech marketplace, the department store, the mono brand. It's very it's a very wild ride.
It takes a lot of resilience, that's for sure. But also, to your point, to keep in contact with the customer at a certain level, you really have to work even harder sometimes to make sure you're carving out that moment. So a mandate of mine was wherever I travelled in Farfetch, I went either for an event, which I knew I was going to meet with customers, or I'd get the team to set up meeting with customers. I found it so fascinating, especially with the Farfetch business model, to hear, our top and most loyalist clients' view. And I love the fact they were so open and honest with me, the good and the
Yes.
really bad sometimes. It was so integral for me to go back to the board and be able to tell them about customer insights that I'd heard directly from them.
Actually, so touching on that, obviously you and I both know about this, but for our listeners, I think it's very interesting. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the importance that private clients had within the organization in terms of just like general sales metrics, just setting a little bit of that context?
Yeah.
And then also what I really loved is what your team did in terms of the voice of the customer program to really share across the organization what were those customers like, who were they, what were they saying about Farfetch? How did they live? Like, I think to your point, it's so integral to getting those insights to the rest of the organization. And you guys really did an amazing job of that.
Yeah, and we really believed it was such a key part of our role to do that. Was although everybody saw us as a sales team, which that's what we were, but actually we're also very much the voice of the customer. We had over 150 stylists in the end talking to our customers day in, day out with some incredible insights. That's kind of why we love what we do, and that's kind of what used to make my job worthwhile when you heard those. But from a point of Farfetch, we looked after all the private clients. So they were 1% of the client base, but nearly 30% of Farfetch total business. That is a huge number. So we had over 25,000 VIP clients globally, and each of those VIPs were assigned one of our team to a stylist. And we always said it was a bit like stylist Tinder, because it was really important that we matched the right stylist with the customer. And we put a lot of measures in place to make sure that once a customer became a VIP and became into the tier, we made sure we really understood who that customer was. And when we talk about the voice of the customer, as I said earlier, Farfetch is really a tech business with a very tech mindset. And a lot of people weren't the consumer. I'd say probably 50% of the company, if not more, were not the consumer. So I think from a luxury point of view, it's been the first time I'd experienced that, and I was really shocked. But I realized it was really important that we got the voice of the consumer out there, because they needed to understand who's buying the end product. Why are they doing? When private client, we had many requests because we did need to treat our customers differently, because it was a touch point level of service, and rightly so. But when you're putting in a request to the product team or to the board or to the marketing team, to be able to understand that, it's best to do it through the eyes of the consumer. And there was an education piece. Who are these customers? So whenever we did global all hands, whenever we had any moment to talk about the customer, we did. And I feel like we got such amazing feedback the couple of times we did it, that we continue to do that and continue to push the voice of the customer to the wider, as an education piece to the business as well. Farfetch was quite a complex business model, especially in terms of receiving orders. Some clients would be ordering 20 items, so they're getting 20 deliveries. It's not always consolidated into one. So that's kind of some of the things the teams were on the front line navigating every day. And they did a great job of it.
I think that's fascinating, because there are other businesses where you would have left the stylist owning that relationship with the customers and keeping the information about that customer within their little black book, which is like the old way of doing things. But being able to actually give a voice to the stylists,
Yeah.
also being able to gather insights and deliver those insights to leadership, I think is something that was really interesting and hadn't been done so successfully before necessarily.
Well, I'm glad it was of use to people, but like I said, it really helped us for people in the wider organisation to understand why we had particular requests. But I just think we had some incredible clients as well. It's interesting for merchandising, particularly as well, when we're onboarding new brands to the platform. Who are these people? What is it they want? No matter how many events I attend, no matter how in any of the businesses, it's always so interesting to meet different customers, and private clients have always got the most incredible stories.
And so private clients, as you put it, is the top 1% of spenders.
Yes.
What is the category of customers below that? So not focusing on Farfetch, but
Yeah.
generally within the
In ge-
market. And do you think that there is a specific strategy that needs to be applied to the tier below?
Yes. So in general, I'd call them personally a mid-tier client. And that's kind of someone who's not just shopped once, maybe shopped a handful of times, kind of resonates with the brand. No, they like the brand, made a few purchases. They're not your number one client, but they may be your number one client of the future. And actually, I personally think, especially in the work I do in consulting, this comes up nearly every day in the role that we do, is that they often get overlooked by many brands. You know, it's natural to focus on the top 1%, but actually that's the easiest job sometimes. You know, they're the 1%, that's who you've got the budget assigned for. That's who you've got kind of exclusive capsule collections for, or certain high ticket prices. That's kind of the top end. And from a sales perspective, the team are naturally going to navigate to those people because salespeople get paid on commission. So it's really quite a focus for businesses. And obviously, when you talk about the stat of 1% of your customer base delivering 30% of the revenue, you completely understand that. But sometimes the mid-tier can be up to or over 50% of your revenue. And even the lower the tier beyond then, like who is looking after these people? So with the mid-tier, I really think there's an opportunity that people miss to connect with that. Why I think people worry about their 1%, but then all it takes is for one client to move to a different brand or to change in circumstances, and then your pipeline suddenly becomes fragile. And that's a really risky strategy, I believe. And I think there's a lot of mid-tier clients who actually probably have a higher order frequency but a lower basket rate. You actually get more because they've got more opportunities because they're purchasing on a more regular basis. You've got more touch points with them. You're actually building that relationship. So I actually think more needs to go into budgets, and it doesn't need to be huge amounts of money. It can be really small activations.
But do you think that with the budgets being a bit more limited with that category of customers, that there needs to be more creativity as to how we service those customers? And linked to that, are they more omnichannel? Do you think that they spend more time buying online, given that they might not have a stylist assigned to them? How does that differ for that customer segment?
I think with that customer, consistency and connection and community is key. I really think you've got to be consistent with those customers, because if you turn your back on those customers and just focus on that 1% of clients, they will turn their back. They will go out the store. They will stop browsing your website, whichever it may be. But to your question, there might be more in store because the top 1%, they're very time poor generally. And the whole point of having a personal shopper and a stylist is to alleviate any pain point for a seamless experience. So you might actually see a mid-tier client in store more, but that doesn't mean that they've done all their research, which most clients do these days. I know I certainly do online, but you've definitely got more chance, whether it be digitally or in person, to connect with them. And actually they're very open. It's kind of remembering their preferences sometimes, or taking them from a lunch at a restaurant they've mentioned, or just a small in-store activation. It can be really the smallest things. It doesn't need to be big gestures. They might have mentioned a particular travel destination. You might get them a book before they go away. It really doesn't need to be too overcomplicated, but it does need to have a particular strategy around it. Otherwise, it just looks unmeaningful, and it needs to be done in a genuine way.
So that's interesting because the examples that you give are very much much tactics that would be used by a stylist team or a retail team. How can we marry a more automatic way of caring for those customers in a way that feels genuine with the addition of a team having limited time with clienteling? Is there a match there that needs to happen?
Definitely think we need to close the loop about data we have of a client online and data we have in store. I think a client kind of buys into a brand these days. They're buying into a community. It's not just about a product anymore. It's about a feeling. It's a sense of belonging. But I feel like sometimes data sits in one section, kind of online e-commerce data sits in another, and then in-store sits in another. So it's really about having a 360-degree view. I think that's crucial. And also from an international client. Most clients are international these days. And again, you might bring all those three touch points together, but they might just be a UK view. They might just be a US view. What if a client you have in New York is traveling to Italy? I think there's still a lot of work to do. I think one of the most overused words in retail at times is omnichannel, but we've really got to make some headway into bringing all of those data points together to get one holistic customer view. And I think that is really when the magic will happen.
Yeah. And so the team that conduct the clienteling currently, how do you see them receiving insights that can enable more efficient servicing of the mid-tier? How would that happen from a practical standpoint, given that they are more short with time?
So I always say any data needs to be broken down into sales language. It needs to be broken down into bite-sized pieces. They need information that they can break down at a singular customer level. This is your client. These are your insights. So I think however you get it to them, but it's got to be in bite size, really tangible information and in a kind of a KPI dashboard that they can see their results in real time and they can see instantly what their actions are driving in terms of their performance. I think that's key because otherwise they're in the dark and otherwise they can't strategize. They need their own sales strategy for each client, but they can't do that without the data insights. But at the same time, if you just hand them PDF full of data, it's just going to sit in their inbox and never be seen again.
No, that totally makes sense. And then you mentioned community, and I think that was really interesting to zero in on a little bit more. Generally speaking, actually, what does community means for brand today in 2025?
I really think, again, and I feel like I talk about this a lot, is it's not about a product anymore. I know I feel that as well. I think before you went and bought, say, a pair of trainers, because it was the coolest and the must-have item, it's not just about that anymore. You go and buy those trainers, and yes, they are the coolest must-have item, but it's also what sports club are you wearing those trainers to? What sport are you going to do whilst wearing those trainers? How are you going to style those trainers in the clubhouse afterwards? It's a whole lifestyle. And I think if you look at the likes of Lululemon, and I think it's a lot easier for sports brands because there's this kind of big leisure wear kind of surge at the minute and actually communities becoming bigger. So naturally sports club, running clubs, they tick all those boxes. And I do think it's harder for other brands. But if you look at those kind of brands, they're kind of looking at the collaborations they do. So whether it's a sports brand and kind of a hospitality members club, they're naturally all coming together because people want to feel a feeling. They want to feel it. They want to belong to something. They want to interact on social media with other like-minded individuals. They want to meet other customers. That is what I feel is a sense of community that is moved from product into a whole lifestyle. And it's a brand lifestyle. And you see some brands doing it amazingly well. And I think if you look at the surge of beach club takeovers, some of them make great, perfect sense. Some of them don't make any sense at all. And I think that's what's hard for brands. And you see some of the kind of collaborations. I think Kith is really great at doing different collaborations and just bringing their community together. They do it in a really fun, on-brand way. And, you know, we've seen so many over the years. And just think about Colette in Paris. Before you even got there, before I'd even got to Colette, I knew I was going to make a purchase, no matter how big or small. Whether it's a keyring, a T-shirt, a pair of sneakers, I was purchasing in Colette because it was a destination and they did it very well. A bit like Ralph Lauren has now got their coffee shops because they're trying to drive those people inside. But
Well, yeah.
they also own the tennis space. So they kind of, yes, the coffee shops have become massive and, they're driving that footfall and they want people to linger in their stores more. But they also have that tennis kind of ownership from the brand. And not all brands have that. And I think some really struggle to work out how to connect that community.
Well, I think it's maybe a mix between a very clear identity and the ability to offer a sentiment of belonging, right? You buy
Yeah.
something because of who you want to be and who you want sitting next to you. And I think to your point, when we're thinking about it from a holistic lifestyle standpoint, there needs to be really very, very strong long-term strategy care on those partnerships.
Yeah.
It's not about experiencing the brand just within the brand's owned environment anymore.
Yeah. No, it's totally not. And I think another person who does it well is Ines. I think they're a company that really do it well in the Middle East. It's a very concentrated market, so it's easier for them, but they really bring that online and then physical in-store pop-up moment, unexpected pop-ups sometimes. I think pop-ups are also great for brands to try in different regions or try in regions they're trying to kind of expand into. They're also a great way of doing surprise and delight for clients, but they're also a good test. You can test some real key data points without going and spending huge budgets on new stores. Sometimes it can be surprising. You go into a region and you think, oh my God, this is going to be incredible. And it just doesn't work for whatever reason. So I think not only do the pop-ups help build that community in areas they don't have physical stores, but also it helps them create that community with their digital and online customer as well.
Yeah, you think that it can be a testing ground, a test and learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
That makes sense. And so, actually, with those different physical activations, what do you think is the re-engagement tactics for online engagement after those physical experiences? Might it be events? Might it be a pop-up? Is it the same approach you think as stores? Or do we need to think about engagements within the community in a different manner, looking at social media engagement as a key one to bring people into your world?
Yeah. I absolutely think social media is key for that in terms of a digital presence of showing up for your customer in a fun, kind of engaging way online. People consume too much these days, so they're consuming one brand to the other. So it's about how you as a brand show up digitally as well as in person. But it's also the connection you build. If you're building this community, you're kind of allowing more touch points, whether they be digital or physical, with your client. You're adding more pieces to the journey, and therefore you're allowing the customer to genuinely and organically come on the journey with you, which is key. It's got to feel genuine. It's got to feel organic. Otherwise it just feels forced and awkward. Customers are the first ones to feel that, and they will walk away and go to someone else who resonates far more deeply with them.
Seems from what you're saying that when we think of the concept of loyalty, community can be both the funnel for loyalty as well as the retention engine. With loyalty, we probably, as you said, want to have customers engaging with as many touch points as possible with the brand in as many different possible physical environments, digital channels. And in that sense, community is key to help tie all of this together.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. And I think, like you said, it is a retention driver too. It's like the more you get them to feel like they belong with you, the more they're going to, interact with you, the more they're going to look at your latest collection, look at your kind of what's new this week. They're going to be online more. You're going to have more visits to your website. So there is a real retention part of it. And again, it comes back to that mid-tier level. This is your mid-tier level. The top 1% probably, well, more than likely, definitely not coming to your run club. They're definitely not engaging, highly unlikely, with all your social media, Instagram, TikTok activity. This is that community who are the future pipeline. Not all of them, but some of them will be your future top customers. I always say this to team: no one walks in a top VIP client. They have to be nurtured, they have to be raised. So everybody runs and focuses on that client, but they forget a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, they walked in and purchased, a wallet, maybe, ever hearing a pair of sneakers, whatever it may be. So you really have to nurture that. But this whole community piece is the mid-tier, and that's who it's aimed for, it's my belief.
How do we know from engaging with them, might it be at an event or might it be in the store, how do we get to learn more about them and use this information for digital marketing, for example, to be able to serve them better personalization? Do you think that right now it's solely on the shoulders of the sales associates or the stylists to really, really gather that insight, trying to invest in that customer so we can then service them later on better? Or do you think that that customer naturally offers this kind of information and is expecting digital touchpoints to then follow on what has been shared?
I think it really splits between the sales team and the marketing team. I think at a very, very granular level, it definitely sits with the sales team. They're the ones who have, whether it's online or a physical store, they're the ones with the relationship. They're the ones who know when their anniversary is, they know when it's their dog's birthday, they know when a big event is happening, or they also know what a meaningful, nice note would be to someone at the right time, which goes a long way. But then there is a bigger base of clients that you just don't have the capability of speaking. That's where I think marketing and the social media team come in. I think that is when you gather a lot more mass insights and a bit more generalist, but you're still pulling a lot of insights from your socials and also from the e-commerce team. I think it's kind of, what are we getting from marketing and the socials? What are we pulling and what are we learning about our customer and how they're shopping from the e-commerce team? And what are we finding out from our physical retail spaces? But then how are we blending that picture together to get a wider, more holistic view of the overall customer? Because that customer will be shopping across all of those 3 points. They're not different people. You're just gaining different insights and different levels of granular information from each of those touch points.
Yeah, I think that we're doing a pretty good job in the space to figuring out who that customer is, but I still feel like we're not in a place where we're able to serve the right content to them in all those touch points. I feel like the clienteling in store is probably the much more advanced part of the equation because of that human element and that technology that's enabling the sales associates in the store. I also feel that because a lot of the clienteling started when e-commerce wasn't really a normalized way
Yeah.
of shopping for
Yeah.
customers, and now
Totally.
it's right. Like,
Yeah.
because would you say, like,
Totally.
your career obviously spans such a long time. What have you seen in terms of the change in the ability of customers to, well, not the ability, but the change of behavior with customers shopping more online? I'm super curious to hear that from you because 15 years ago, most customers, especially top spenders, would have been shopping in store, as you said. Now
All in store.
they don't have the time, so there's a lot
Yeah.
of one-to-one. But do you see VIC still shopping also by themselves online? What about the mid-tier? I'm just really curious about what has been the evolution.
The evolution is that people are far more comfortable. Even when I think back to my Bottega days, we did everything physically in the stores or at fashion shows or at events. Very rarely we tried to encompass a digital aspect, but it wasn't the norm. And that actually wasn't that long ago. So people are far more comfortable. And obviously the pandemic definitely helped everybody. VICs will absolutely shop online. And sometimes prefer, but that's why sometimes they've got stylists to assist them. And instead of going through the whole website, a stylist can make a highly beautiful curated edit of what they know they're going to like. But I think across everybody, everyone's just a lot more comfortable. And yes, there'll always be that point. And I know I'm this person. I love to go around the stores and see it and feel it and touch it. But I'm then going home and I'll be shopping and all of it and ordering it to my door. I think that's also the other aspect, is that if you're shopping online, you can have it delivered to your home and you can try it on, you can style it with everything you wanted to. You can't do that in a store. So I do think there's no barriers where before even it was just kind of shoes or bags. But now, in Farfetch, we sold very, very high price point tickets of watches and jewelry and handbags and artwork. We sold everything off, to these VICs, and
I
they were
remember I
completely
remember the
comfortable.
story of the Versace dumbbells. That
Yeah,
was such a big
yeah. We used
but
Chanel surfboards.
But in terms of that behavior that you describe, I feel like we're still not able to fully track that of I go and browse in the store, see what I like, and then on my own time, I order those products to my house.
Yeah, this is what's missing for sure.
Yeah, because a lot of people that I speak with have a vague understanding of, at least knowing the overlap of customer base. So I think that's pretty much what people have is like, okay, this customer shops both online and in store. We know that.
Yeah,
But we're not having a clear view on when are customers browsing in store and then shopping online after that visit for those
yeah.
products that were considered in store. I think that's very interesting because also it's then tricky to fully understand the role of the store in that journey and to understand attributions as well.
Yeah, totally. And I still think there's a lot of work to do. And again, doing the role I do now, we speak about this with our clients a lot. It's like, and some people, like you said, have got better at it and have invested in the right systems that allow them to have a global view and a 360-degree view of their customer from a yes, I shop on ecom, but yes, I also shop in X store and this store as well when I'm traveling. But beyond that, we haven't really gone any further. But there's many, many brands that still don't have even that basic view and that they have no idea that some of their top clients online are coming into their stores and they've maybe only seen them for the first time. And I think that's kind of a dangerous place to be in for brands as we continue to evolve. And obviously, hopefully, with everything that's going on with AI and, and it needs to be in real time as well. It can't be like, oh, last week someone walked in the store. It needs to be a notification on the Sales Associates app or vice versa. Online, you get a pop-up up to the ecom team, oh, this person's, a very loyal customer in our X flagship in New York. And actually now they're just about to place an order so that the sales associate can say, hey, I've seen you place this order. Let me know if there's anything you need, anything we to advise you on, and really bring those dots to all of those different aspects together because the loop is quite far from being closed, in my personal opinion.
Well, and I think it's interesting to bring it back to our conversation on the voice of the customer. The problem with a lot of the voice of the customer insight is that it's not gathered in a way that is then actionable from a commercial standpoint.
Yeah.
Right. So all those programs tend to be really, really amazing insights that are to improve processes and all that. But later on, by the point that those insights are being digested by the teams, there's nothing to be done for that one specific customer for what they wanted at that time.
No, but I do think that you can build out cohorts of customers. And I do think if you invest in the right, and again, it's not always the bigger budgets get you the best solutions, that's for sure. I think I've looked at and worked alongside so many different kind of CRM systems and different technologies. It's not always big one and the most expensive one is best. It's what's right for your business. But I do think from that point of view is that you can build a cohort of customers to at least hyper personalize. And I think that's quite key as well, because again, is there a section of customers who prefer kind of the more active lifestyle? Is there someone who actually is looking for more evening gowns, or they're just a bit more social? They've got a big social calendar coming up. Is it the people who travel a lot? Do you think you can build out personalized cohorts for those customers? So instead of just communicating to thousands of customers, can then communicate to, maybe you're communicating to tens of thousands of customers, you can then communicate to 1,000 customers, 500 customers, 100 customers. And I think that does help clients feel like you are understanding them and they feel like they're getting some sort of personalization.
That's really interesting because the way that you're explaining personalization with this cohort approach is actually completely different from the collaborative filtering approach that a lot of retailers use, which is, you're similar from a demographic standpoint. So, demographic standpoint to another client. Therefore, I will show you their basically purchase this story. But
Yeah.
here you're flipping it on its head and saying it has to be about an understanding of the lifestyle of the customer
Yeah.
to speak to them in terms that actually matter to them, that might not have anything to do with their age, with their gender. It's really a question of understanding their liking, their
Yeah.
preferences at a much deeper level.
Yeah, because you're talking about product. You need the product to talk to the customer. It needs to resonate. And we did a lot of work on this in Farfetch because the customer base was so huge. We really had to drill down and personalize, because if I was sending a sports edit to someone who actually was really looking for kind of a statement piece necklace, they're going to think, again, it's a bit like walking in a store and not being recognized. You're going to turn your back, walk away, you're going to put your laptop away, and you're not going to, engage with that brand again. Suppose in a way you kind of go back to that piece of community, but you need product to speak to the customer. It's got to be something that they would be interested in, that they were going to, and no one needs another email in their inbox right now. No one needs another WhatsApp. No one needs another notification on their Instagram. Nobody. Everyone's trying to do the opposite. You've got to be able to pick your time and really resonate and personalize where you
Make
can.
them seen in
Absolutely.
terms of, yeah.
Totally.
And so actually, in terms of opportunities for this year and beyond, what do you think is the most exciting opportunities for retailers?
I personally think AI is going to be fantastic. I'm excited, and I think the more AI can do, I never think it will replace an in-person connection as well. But I do think it will help close the loop on what we've talked about of physical being in one location, e-commerce in another, and nobody speaking across digital and physical, because either it can't because of the data restrictions, or it's just too much of a wider global landscape that it's impossible to put all those touch points into one kind of holistic view. Although it's moving quickly, it's going to be more long term. I think the community piece will get bigger and bigger. And I'm kind of excited in terms of some people just do it really well. I love a collab like a Frame and Ritz Paris. It's such a good one, no? That's a collaboration you didn't even know you needed till you got it. And they're the ones I love. But also with that, sometimes you can get market saturation. The people who do it well, they'll continue to do it well. But what we don't want to do is get kind of consumer fatigue at the same time from everybody trying to do. If you look at the LV and the Formula One, how are you bringing those two worlds together in a very organic way?
Well, I think it's because of that element of surprise and delight, which
Exactly.
has to happen across the board. And when it comes to collaborations, obviously we love collabs, but because everybody loves collabs, there's a lot of time that forced elements of let's do a collab and just trying to figure out that way
Just
instead,
because.
just because, rather than thinking about what will be surprising and delighting our
Yeah.
customers.
To think about the DNA of your brand and does it make sense? Like I said earlier, Kith do it extremely well. I think I went on their website the other day, and the first product that came up was a New York Yankees baseball. It wasn't a hoodie, it wasn't a baseball cap. So I think brands like that do it very well and play to their strengths. I think what Burberry's doing right now with its community is super exciting, taking it back to its kind of original roots, and also that a bit of that is in 2000 nostalgia. I think that's very clever with what they're doing. So it's getting it right. And I think people then get excited and then get taken kind of on the whole brand journey.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, exciting times ahead. And I think you alluded to that, but what would you say are risks and threats for brands to be mindful of this year?
This year's, super challenging, as everybody knows. What we've talked about in terms of your customer base, over-reliance on your top 1% of the customers. And I find that people rely on them too much at the wrong time. It's like at crunch point when they really need them, they rely on them, but there isn't a pipeline. What I'd like everybody to take from this year is that you've got to build customers for lifelong value, not just for Q4's results or Q1 next year. you've got to build a pipeline of clients in a genuine way, but you've got to keep nurturing them. You've got to keep connecting with them. You've got to be consistent with them. And I feel like there's some brands continue to, and especially in the brands I've worked at and what I do now, I see it all the time, an over-reliance on a certain cohort, which is very risky. It's also risky when they don't have a strategy when going after a different demographic. So I feel like everybody went after Gen Z because someone reported that they were the future of fashion. And they are, but it will take time, as everything does. And then everybody forgot about the silver generation who were there ready to spend and to be told amazing stories and to attend events and to shop online and to buy into your higher price point. So I feel like if you're going to go for a different demographic, especially right now, you definitely need a customer strategy behind it. So there's various risks of over reliance on certain cohorts of customer, and risks of not having customer strategies when going after a certain different demographic that's not necessarily, is maybe something you're expanding into, or a different market, whichever it may be.
Yeah, I completely agree. That totally makes sense. Having a lack of understanding of the markets you're going after tends to be the
Yeah.
flavor of the day and not the
Yeah.
best, not the
Yeah.
most effective tactic. Well, Claire, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I feel like you've given us a lot to think about. It's been a delight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation.